Hello, and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynne. I'm a journalist and content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we bring you all kinds of tips, tricks, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
I used spreadsheets for 15 years.
Oh my God, did you?
I know. But as my business grew, I grew out of the spreadsheets.
Yes.
And it got harder to sort of keep on top of all my invoicing and quoting and things like that. And Rounded was the accounting software that finally converted me. And it helped simplify my taxes and also just let me take ownership of what goes on in my freelance business. And I love that I've got visibility over my finances, so I can see what's happening with my cash flow and all the other insights that are on the dashboard.
I know, the dashboard is so cool. I love a good pie chart, and I love the whole thing. It makes it so much easier to work it out.
Yeah.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you can save 20% on any annual Rounded plan, even if you're an existing customer. So see the show notes for details. Hey, Rach, this week we're talking about a subject I'm so super passionate about. I know I've had many rants with you about it, about the craft of writing, because it's always been a bit of a bugbear of mine. There's all this hype about following your dream and everything, and not a lot about learning how to write well, like that basic skill.
Yes, because I think like experienced writers make it seem easy. Isn't that clients think that it was so easy, and can we just cut it down because, it probably took you about 10 minutes to do that, but actually they don't see everything that goes into it. There is a lot of skill involved in being a great writer. So I'm really excited, I know you are too, about our guest today, Dan Kaufman, who teaches the craft of writing, and he is as passionate and almost militant, which we're going to find out later about the subject as we are. Anyone who, has a Sydney Morning Herald subscription has to read Dan's thing. We're going to put it in the show notes, his piece on, using self-indulgent language, I think.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, Dan was a panelist at the summit last year, and I know he's got some strong opinions. So do you want to tell us about Dan, and then we'll get him into the hot seat?
Yep, sure. Dan Kaufman is a former editor and journalist with more than 30 years' experience. After working on different magazines in the 90s, he joined the Sydney Morning Herald, where he wrote for and edited almost every feature section at one time or another, from travel to health and science. He also launched Sydney Barzine, which I used to read, which he also ran for half a decade, and he taught journalism and media writing at UTS and the Uni of Sydney. He's the Director of Media Survival, which runs media training, writing, sub-editing and communication skills courses. And he also still writes the occasional column for the Sydney Morning Herald. So welcome, Dan.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to be here.
Well, Dan, we've just been talking off air about how we connected at the Content Bite Summit when you were on the panel. I think that was about how to find corporate and B2B work. But for those who don't know you, can you share a little bit about your business and how it's evolved over the years?
Sure. Well, you mentioned that I taught at university, and I taught a number of subjects, but my favorite one was sub-editing. And I loved teaching that because really it was just so hands-on and practical. I was teaching key tips and techniques that I desperately wish I had known at the beginning of my career, or in the middle of my career, or even at the end of my tenure at the Sydney Morning Herald. Because when you teach, you actually learn a lot yourself. And when I finished teaching at university, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could actually turn this into a business? What if I could actually teach this to other people? And at first, I thought, well, it might be good for beginners or people new to the industry. And I rapidly realized that even experienced writers and editors would learn something within the first 10 minutes of a workshop. And so that sort of helped shape really my whole business of, okay, this is something I think everyone should know. And before you said that I might be almost as militant as you about writing, I think I'm more so.
I agree with you.
So yeah, that's really how my business came about. And I've been writing for over 10 years. I now almost earn enough to pay for my coffee, but I really love doing it. No. And I also learned that teaching's as hard as writing and editing. I think it took me 10 years of teaching just to get to the point where I'm happy with it. You know.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tricky, isn't it? But you said you're still writing for the Herald as well as your courses. What do you love about writing? You've obviously still got a bit of a love there.
No, I've got a blank look on my face because there's so many different honest answers I could give to that. I mean, I love writing for a really simple joy of I like putting words together. And a little bit like how a child might like putting Lego blocks together. I just love the act of putting words together, which is why when I was at the Herald and I wrote for it or edited almost every section, because I didn't care whether it was travel or technology or health. To me, the idea is if you can make something interesting, that's great. And if you could actually play with words to make it seem new, that's great. So I always actually liked the technique, the craftsmanship of writing.
Mm.
However, to answer your more specific question about perhaps the columns I write for the Herald, that's therapy. That's where if something humiliating happens to me, or if I'm embarrassed about something, or I'm just angry about something, I'll write about it. And then if I think I can make it relatable to other people, I'll turn it into a column. And sometimes the Herald, for some reason, might even publish it. So that's the idea of that. It's free therapy because I'm too cheap to pay for it.
Well, yeah, let's delve a bit more into this craft of writing as a craft idea, something that needs to be practiced and perfected. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm always doing that. I'm doing it all the time, and I've been working for myself I've been working in my own business for 27 years, but there's always something to learn, I think. Do you agree?
That's the very basis of everything I do. But
Yeah.
yes, it is. I once heard a story about a chief sub-editor at the New York Times who, in his late 60s, he decided to finally leave journalism and he wanted to become an apprentice shoe cobbler in the East Village. And someone came up to him and said, well, why are you doing this? Why aren't you just retiring? And he said, well, I've almost learned as much as I can about writing and editing, and it's time for me to learn a new trade. And I really love that. I love, how he was at the top of his game, and yet he was still learning. But, in his late 60s, New York Times, he finally felt he almost learned as much as he could. And I also love the idea of him thinking of writing and editing as a trade, a craft. And that's something I firmly believe in. I think a lot of people become writers because they just think they have this God-given talent for it. And you know what? I'm not trying to make too much fun of them because that's why I did it too. I thought I had this God-given talent and I was amazing. But as soon as I realized, actually, no, it's a trade and it's something I can learn key skills and techniques and I can get better and better. And then when I learned that actually never stops. It's so complex and it can actually evolve and you can evolve with it. That's when all of a sudden I really found my calling. Because to be perfectly honest, before I became a journalist, I became a journalist really young at the age of 18. I thought I would be nothing in life, really. And I have no ambition at all. And it was only when I sort of discovered this that all of a sudden a whole world opened up to me. And that's also, I think, why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely understand that because I've started doing more training in recent years. And the first kind of really formal training I've done since going back to uni. And it's just amazing, isn't it? Like you do go down whole other pathways that you never knew existed in terms of the skills that you can learn. And I just love it. I'm obsessed with continuing to learn, I suppose, and become a better writer. Yeah.
And I'm really impressed that you did that because when I do workshops, I find there are two different kinds of participants. You have those who, like you, are experienced, you already know your shit, but you're open to learning more. And I find they're the people who, A, from the get-go are really good, and B, they can become amazing. much better than me.
Mm.
And then you have the others who are sometimes are forced to go to my workshop, such as through their boss, and they're so cocky and arrogant. They don't think they need to know anything. They think they're great, and they're always the worst, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm always impressed when someone with as much experience as you are smart enough and open enough to go, actually, I'd like to learn more.
Mm.
Mm.
But I'm also talking myself up because I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly trying to learn more. But I think I've noticed that someone who's seen countless writers and editors, it's the ones who never stop learning and you aren't scared. You just go in and want to learn more. They're the ones who really are amazing. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
hope you're right. I'll take that on board.
So what I loved from your bio was that you also have a love of sub-editing. So I was a sub for a really long time. So I'm totally with you. Tell us a little bit about what sub-editing is, because I don't know that everybody knows what it is anymore.
Most people don't.
Yeah. The Herald got rid of all their subs. So I think a lot of people don't know that they're there or what they do.
That's right. That's right. Often when people get rid of their sub-editors, they then have to rehire them after
Yeah.
a year or so. And I
Yes.
see that a lot.
Mm.
They get rid of the sub-editors, all of these massive mistakes come through, then they have to rehire them. Often it's secretly, often have to outsource it secretly.
Mm.
But yeah, a lot of people don't know what sub-editors do, which is why whenever I teach sub-editing, I started off by describing what it is they do.
Mm.
I personally like to think of sub-editing as being on the same coin as writing, the two sides of the same coin. You can't be a good writer if you're not a good sub-editor. You can't be a good sub-editor if you're not a good writer.
Yeah.
Because really, to be a good sub-editor, you need to know how to put sentences together. You need to know how to make them flow. You need to know how to make the paragraphs flow. You need to know how to structure a piece. You need to know how to make it interesting, how to make it compelling. You need to be able to think about the reader. You need to actually be able to think of everything. Really, to be a good sub, you need to be a good writer and vice versa. Technically, there are two different kinds of writers. You have some writers who are great news journalists, and they're great at uncovering great stories, but they're crap writers. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I have a lot of respect for people who can uncover news stories. In fact, that's a skill that I don't have myself, really. I mean, I've done a lot of news journalism, but I'll never be the greatest news journalist. But then you have the writers who, do need to write well. And for them, sub-editing is crucial. And especially since a lot of publications are getting rid of their subs, it's even more crucial, I think, that people know sub-editing. But to give you the short answer to your question, sub-editing really is all about how do you make a story as good as it can be for publication. From how do you make it read well, how do you make it logical, how do you make it compelling, how do you get rid of all of the mistakes, how do you check it. It's about really applying critical thought, making sure that it's actually truthful. It's about everything and making sure you don't get sued for it. It's about looking at the whole picture, and it's about applying a lot of critical thought. And that's also why I believe everyone really needs these skills, especially in a world where you don't have as many subs as there used to be to fall back on.
I completely agree. I was a sub at the beginning of my career as well for many years, but realized I was just getting too, kind of envious of the stories coming across my desk. I wanted to be writing those stories. And so it was just made perfect sense to kind of go more into the features department. But those skills that I learned as a sub have served me so well over the years, and I've taken them with me everywhere. So, I mean, it seems to be a bit of a dying skill, I think, particularly in mags, but perhaps not in other areas. I mean, do you see it as a skill that's still really necessary and there is a demand for it?
I think there's definitely a demand for the skills. Whether there's a demand for the actual title of sub-editor, that's a different story. There are definitely roles out there, and I find they ebb and they flow and they ebb and they flow. But there's definitely a massive demand for people with the skills to do that. Because if you don't have those skills, then you basically, well, as I said before, because really we're having less and less fallbacks, less and less organizations have subs of people with those skills. So if you can't write well yourself, if you can't edit your own copy, then at the risk of rhyming, you're sloppy.
Mm.
you're going to look very sloppy. And so organized, and especially since obviously content, no, and there's never been a point in history when there's been so much content produced. The skills for sub-editing are needed more than ever.
Mm.
But often I find those skills are sort of listed within job descriptions rather than the job title being sub-editor.
Mm.
But employers are definitely looking for people with those skills. They need it.
Mhm.
Regardless of whether people are writing their own copy, regardless of whether people sell their soul and they use AI, you desperately need those sub-editing skills to try and make something meaningful.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah.
It's so interesting because there's less of a demand. I mean, when I used to be a sub-editor at the Woman's Weekly, which I was for quite a few years, I think there were 6 of us there at the time. And, there was a specialist puzzle sub-editor, a specialist cooking sub-editor, and I certainly spent my fair bit of time doing sub-editing the knitting patterns, which is a whole other story, I'm
Oh my
sure.
God. Can you imagine the detail?
The
Oh,
detail. But I think there's only 2 or 3 now, and it just seems to me that the time we spent and everything is just not there. But in corporate work, there is a demand for sub-editors. People want accurate copy. Do you think that's where the money is and that's where the jobs are?
It's definitely where the money is.
Mm.
I think the people often have to ask themselves, A, why are they doing it? Are they doing it for the passion? Are they doing it for the money? A weird combination of the both. But in terms of money, it's definitely in corporate work, and you're perfectly right. Corporates more than ever need people with these skills. Absolutely. I mean, with each one producing so much content, desperately trying to make it stand out, desperately trying to make it rank in Google, desperately trying to make it not look like AI copy, you definitely need those skills in-house.
Yeah.
interesting. I know that there are people at Rachel's List who've considered perhaps moving from journalism into editing or offering editing as a service. We've done masterclasses on it. What would be your advice to them? I mean, what skills do you think are non-negotiable for a freelance editor these days?
I'm going to try not to start yelling and screaming because I get, as you know, a little obsessed about this. I can be a little hypocritical. You see, I started editing after only 2 years of working full-time as a journo. Yet my instinct is to answer your question by saying they really should have more experience first. The more experience you have, the better a sub you'll be. I don't really think you should start playing with someone else's copy until you're freaking good yourself, until you're a really good writer. It's something you've thought about. And also, there's a lot of judgment and maturity required for subbing. A bad sub-editor can actually make something worse. A good sub-editor, however, will not only make it better, they'll often make it so good that the original journal didn't even think that anything had been changed. That's subtle, and yet they can transform it completely. I remember at the Herald, there were times that I'd have to perform open heart surgery on an article, and this and that and the other. And I rapidly realized that actually, if you do it well, the journo who wrote the piece not only won't have a problem with it, they won't even think you changed anything. And I've got some middle
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a common, all subs have actually come across that.
I think I've made a lot of people look good over the years, and I'm sure you're the same, that many people have. It's just polishing, but I think if you ask them what I did, I don't know if they'd know. It's just that sort of finesse. And I think when you're a good sub, you've got to leave your ego at the door because it's not your work. You're making somebody else look good, making somebody else's words work better. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. It's very much about, and I love how he said it's about making other people look better. Your service is really your service is to the reader. It's about giving the reader the best experience. And you never want to be a word switcher. A word switcher is someone who'll just change a word because they themselves would use something different. And it's no, you have to actually edit for very specific reasons. And so, to answer your question, to be a sub, you need a lot of experience and judgment and maturity because it's a big responsibility, both to the writer, but also really to the reader as well.
Mm.
So I think you need a lot of experience. You definitely need, as you said, to check your ego at the door, which is a tough thing because people often become journalists because of their ego. It takes a certain amount of ego to think, oh, if I write something, people will love it. People will read it. And
Yes.
yet subs actually have to check that at the door. And that actually also takes a fair degree of maturity.
Mhm.
It requires a lot of critical thought to be a good sub. You really, really need to apply thought and think, is this likely? Hang on a second, I have to check this. You have to be someone who isn't scared to pick up the phone and call and check things and challenge things. You can't, it's a lot of people have this mistaken idea that all subs do is fix punctuation and grammatical mistakes. That's a minute part of the job.
Mm.
It really requires all of those skills. So, for someone who wants to move into it, I recommend experience more than anything else.
Mhm.
Then I recommend that they do online courses.
Your courses.
Sure.
Yeah.
Naturally.
I guess I was thinking more like the caliber of Rachel's list are those older people who would have a lot of experience, and they also, might be, wanting to move more into editing on online content and that sort of thing. So I'm guessing they're going to need to learn really more technical skills, aren't they? Like you're going to need to know, best practices for SEO and perhaps UX and things like that. Is there any other things that come up that you think are important?
Well, you know what? Just those two alone are massive.
Yeah.
For example, look, I teach a lot of courses. For a long time after I left the Herald, I really focused on digital marketing, websites, how to write for websites. And I realized that most people have no idea what web accessibility is really about. Half haven't even heard of it. The other half have, but they have wildly incorrect ideas of what it involves. Even for something as simple as writing alternative text for an image on a website, so much bad advice that's actually it's wrong. It's against regulations. There's so much, there's so much education involved in learning how to write with accessibility in mind. How do you write link text? Most people don't even know how to do that. I still see websites from big organizations, top 4 banks, large telecommunications organizations who have click here links on their websites. It's like, what the hell? There's a lot that people they don't realize. So writing for accessibility is alone one huge thing. But yes, subs need to know, especially if they are old school subs who come from the print world, or even online, they still don't know. Now, writing for search engine optimization, I've seen so many people butcher copy by writing for SEO without really understanding exactly what will work, what won't work. That alone is a huge thing. Then you have the world of usability, which is a massive obsession of mine, because that's actually something that I studied a precursor of back when I was young, before I had grey hair at university when I studied at night. And I'm obsessed with usability. And almost the whole organization's notion of usability, I think, is pretty heavily flawed. I've worked with a lot of UX consultants who knew their shit, and they couldn't get the marketing directors on board. They couldn't get the CEOs on board because most people just don't really understand what's involved. And I come across a lot of copywriters who talk about usability, but then when I look at their work, it's like, this isn't usable. And then I start getting angry and I yell and my hands start waving.
And then you write another column for the Herald. Is that
After my
right?
nervous breakdown, yes.
What sort of people do your courses, and what do you find that people are looking for?
Well, I teach a wide range of courses and I teach a wide range of different people. It really varies. As I mentioned, initially I thought it'd be people who are new to the industry, people who want to learn, but I actually find that's a small portion. Normally the people who go to my course are people who actually run. First of most of my workshops are in-house. They're customized for clients. And normally it's when people realize, look, we can actually bring this up an extra level or two. So that's the brunt of my work. I do, however, do also teach public workshops. And that's often where I get the people who have some experience, they've been doing it for several years, sometimes 20 years, but they want to learn more. They want to know more about writing for SEO or usability. They want to brush up on their skills. And it's really just the refresher element alone is a huge thing for people. I often will have people come to my course. They've been doing it for 20 years. They think they know how to write in the active voice, which is such a simple, basic, primary technique that everyone should know. And I find actually, no, they thought this active voice wasn't. And I come across that a lot. I even come across that in organization style guides where they talk about active voice and they describe it completely incorrectly. There are a lot of people who learned when they were young, and then they've sort of trusted in their head. In the same way you have that childish game of whispers, where you whisper something into someone's ear, and by the end, someone hears something completely different. And that's often the way with what we've learned. So often people go for a refresher and they go, oh, holy crap, I actually did know that, and I stopped doing it. Or holy crap, thought I was meant to be doing this, and I realized actually I should be doing it that way. So the refresher element is a huge part of it. And that's what I really enjoy doing too. I really love it when I see someone who is a good writer and a good editor, but also the light bulb moment goes and I realize, oh, holy shit, I can now do that. But I mean, I can answer your question forever. For example, I do feature writing courses and I love it when an experienced feature journalist comes in and they learn a whole different way that they can structure a feature that they never even thought of before. And that's like a light bulb moment for them. And that's something I enjoy a lot, and they get obsessed with that.
What are your favorite courses to teach? Like, what are you always glad of when you get hired to do a certain type of course?
Subediting is always one of my favorite ones because it really covers everything. Whether you want to be a good writer, a good editor, a good sub, I love the subediting one because I think you'll definitely learn something crucial with that. Having said that, I also teach this course called Press Release Writing and Media Pitching, which is mainly for people, of course, in PR or comms. And I love that because as someone who used to get with countless pitches, as someone who used to be this really grumpy, irritable, horrible person who people pitch to, and I'd be so horrible, which there's no justification for that, by the way. But, I'll be so grumpy. I really love teaching this course for the other side and saying, look, actually, if you do it this way, all of a sudden that grumpy person might pay attention. All of a sudden, actually, if you just make this change, that might actually lead to a story. And I find actually I get a lot of satisfaction out of teaching that because yet again, there are a lot of light bulb moments where people go, holy crap, I can do this right after this workshop. And I love those things. I love that idea that these aren't theoretical courses. It's about actually how can you learn something that you can implement in the next hour. So sub-editing and the press release ones I really love doing. I also teach media law courses. I don't know whether I enjoy teaching them because it's just so hard and it's so insanely complex. But it does at least keep my mind going, which is good.
Media law. Yeah. Well, I think there's a real need for that because I don't think a lot of people get taught media law. That did get beaten into me. And I think particularly with online journalism and people not going through standard newsrooms, there's a lot of mistakes that are being made out there. And it's sometimes frustrating when mainstream media can't cover stories because, they're before the courts or something, and then you have sort of renegade sort of online journalists out there. That's quite a tricky thing.
Oh, it's a huge thing. I mean, look, even when I was the editor at the Herald, most of the editors, including myself, did not know anywhere near as much about media law as we should have. And you only see a lot. I'm not going to name any names or organizations, but it's actually relatively common for journalists or organizations to get into trouble because they're in contempt of court. Or because they've done something they absolutely should not have done. And you only need one lawsuit to screw up your organization too. And now that people are running smaller publications, we're seeing more niche publications, which I love, by the way. I absolutely love some of them. But yeah, if they get a single lawsuit, that's their business goal.
Yeah.
So, that's one that I think is important. I'm not sure whether I enjoy teaching it, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think that with some of these skills, particularly, I was thinking more about the sort of basic skills like grammar and syntax and spelling and things. Do you think there's a bit of shame amongst writers because they don't have these skills and they don't always get the help that they need or realize how much they need to learn?
There's a massive shame, but there's one problem. A key dilemma in teaching, and quite frankly, a key dilemma in providing training courses is that people don't know what they don't know, which
Yeah.
is why often people don't realize, I don't know that feature structure, because they've never even heard of it. Or they don't know why they need to understand this particular technique because they don't understand it. They don't even haven't heard of it. So I find the biggest issue is people who just don't think they need to know something. They don't think they need to know anymore. They think they've already learned enough and that's it, because they don't know what they don't know. But then in my workshops, I do find, especially people who run teams or they're editors, I think there is they're scared to show that they don't know enough. And that's understandable, by the way. It's completely understandable. But I will repeat, I find that the best editors who go to my workshops are the ones who are really open and they throw themselves into it. And actually the ones who have the best skills to begin with. And you're probably better editors than I am, and they're really to learn and get better, even better throughout it. But yeah, you're right. There's a huge shame. A lot of people feel like, and especially people, they tout themselves as professionals. And so they're scared of showing any weakness if they don't know it. But in reality, being a professional isn't about knowing everything. It's about actually learning and being committed to that process of learning. Yeah. Same as I have although this is now me going off topic, so you can just press stop if you'd like. But I also have an issue with journalists who think that they're experts. And I think, no, our job is to ask experts and to know how to find experts and to have critical thought. But yeah, and I don't think editors should be considered experts at grammar or writing even, but they should be committed to the art of it. And they should be committed to continually learning and getting better and better and better at it. And I think they need to show that openness, because Lord knows I'm still learning and I'm an old man now. And I'm constantly learning and revising my own work.
Yeah, we were talking on another podcast recently about, those early days when there were so many more people on staff in magazines and, you would have an editor pull you aside and red pen your work and you kind of learnt that way. And I just wonder how many writers entering the market now have ever had that done to their work. And it makes courses like yours so much more important, I think. And just all those basic skills, just learning those basic skills. People just don't have them.
It's a pity, isn't it? It was. It was such a massive formative process for me.
Yeah.
Back when I was young and I had hopes and dreams of having someone older go through my work with a red pen, and you'd learn so much from it.
You'd be completely ashamed of yourself, but you would learn a lot.
You would be, but I think it's also that's something you get over too. After all, you learn to develop a thick skin. And you need a thick skin as a journalist. You need a thick skin in getting criticism. And even if you want to cry, even if you want to scream, even if you want to say that they're wrong, at least if you take a couple of days to process and think, hang on a second, maybe they're right, or maybe there's something I can learn from that. That's how we move forward. And if you don't have that ability, then you can never be good at anything, really. Yeah, so you definitely do need that. And I mean, look, there were times, even like when I was at the Herald, I was still learning. I'm still learning now. But I remember when I was at the Herald, and I was already editing work by well-known people. And I was learning so much myself. And I was writing too. So I was writing and editing at the Herald at the same time. I was editing sections, but because I loved writing, I'd still write stories, even though I wouldn't get paid for it. And when people would go through my work, that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. Why did you do that? Even then my ego would be pricked, to be perfectly honest.
Mm.
And you're right, I actually would have a little bit of shame in everything. And I didn't think of it to give you the most honest answer. Yeah, I actually did, and it's natural. You get so, but you kind of take time, you think about it. And I think that's something that we all need really in any trade.
Mm.
But yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And you're right, if people aren't doing that trial work anymore, how the hell can we get better?
Yeah.
Mm.
But like you said, there is something to be said for, another really key skill, which is being able to separate yourself from what you've produced and not let your ego take a hit, I suppose, if someone is criticizing it.
Mm.
Very difficult to do.
I was so scared of that back bench of sub-editors, but they did teach me a lot. They also taught me, how to have 4 scotches at lunchtime, which luckily I don't do anymore.
Dan might know all about that because he wrote the barzine of
maybe that was a dying art as well. Have 4 scotches at lunchtime, go back and write
and
the
go
front
back
page.
to work.
I know, goodness. But anyway,
I'm nostalgic now.
Oh. Those were the
Yes.
days. Well,
No.
look, I want to just touch on one of your columns. It was called "There's a Special Place in Hell for Those Who Use Acronyms, Memes, or AI." And since I read it, it has really affected me, Dan. Because I do use the word nom and I also do use emojis and I send GIFs all the time. So I don't know if I can be saved, but tell us why you're so militant about this kind of self-indulgent language. That's what you call it.
I think one reason why I'm militant about it is I think it's reflective of lower writing and editing skills in general.
Oh, no.
Where the way we write about most writing skills have really plummeted. And my basic theory of writing is that it's easier than most people realize. And we need to write the way we speak. So when let's start with one thing I made fun of in the column. And by the way, the column I meant every word, but it was also meant to be funny. So
it was very funny.
But I still meant every word. So when I made fun of acronyms, for example, you have that acronym ROLF, rolling on the floor laughing. Now, I don't know about you, but there aren't many times when I throw myself on the floor and I roll around while laughing. It's like, what the hell? But people use that acronym. It doesn't freaking make sense.
No, I always hated that one.
Or LOL. What the hell is wrong with people? So my idea is, what are the emojis? Even laughing emojis with the tears crying out. It's like, how far back could a civilization become for us to start doing this? How far backward? Before I start sounding even crazier than I already do, let's pull F. Scott Fitzgerald into the mix. He once said that exclamation points are like laughing at your own jokes. And when people use things such as LRL or RFL or emojis, that's actually really what they're doing. I believe really we should just write like human beings. Write the way you would talk to someone face to face. And if you wouldn't actually throw yourself on the floor, rolling around laughing, maybe you don't need to use that acronym.
I like that. But besides words, we talked a lot about words. Are there other skills that you need as a writer? Rachel and I often talk about the skill of interviewing, and that's something that is lost too. Do you think that's a dying art, and there are other sort of different skills that you need?
Oh, there are so many different skills that you need. I mean, the art of listening alone is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
We all hear that people don't listen as much as they think they do, but I don't think we ever really realize it ourselves. I remember when I was young and I started interviewing people, and I'd record the interviews and I play them back, and it's amazing how often I would hear someone say something and I didn't hear it while I was interviewing them. I was so wrapped up in what I wanted to say next, I wasn't truly engaged with the conversation.
Yeah.
And it actually took me a long time to get better at that. And it's actually something I'm still working on. All the basic communication skills are really tricky. and people tend to take them for granted and they shouldn't. So I find listening alone is a huge skill. That's why, now, for example, I used to have a lot of respect for Andrew Denton when he did the Enough Rope show a lifetime back, where I thought he handled it so well and he had so much empathy and he listened so well. I mean, I've never even met the guy, I don't know him, but I had so much respect for how he did it because I know how difficult it is to do something that's so seemingly simple. So yeah, I completely agree. There's so many skills. You have the skill of actually understanding what someone would want to read about. You have the skill of actually trying to find a story, uncovering it, researching it. I find most people don't even understand how to actually research a story. So many stories that I see are so thin, they haven't been properly researched. There's no real. Okay, I'm going to just start rashing again. But yes, I agree. There's so many skills, including interviewing and listening and researching and thought and actually putting time into it, which a lot of people don't want to do because there has been this trend these days of journalism, pumping out content as much as you can to try and make a living out of it. And I get that. I want to pay my mortgage too. But you also have to think, why did I get into it? I got into it because I really loved the idea of writing, and I really loved the idea of perfection, of how do I create something that's as good as possible? And to do that, you really have to think about everything from how do I get the most out of an interview? How do I really listen? How can I research this? What really would work? As opposed to, okay, let's just slap this up, put this for AI, maybe I can make a cheap buck.
So I'm guessing that means you'll not be using ChatGPT, you'll just be using your brain.
Well, this is where at the Content Summit, I didn't even think I'd be talking about AI, but someone asked it and I tried to be quiet and I tried to let the other people answer it because I didn't want to answer it because I get so passionate about it. And finally I erupted and I started talking about it. There's so many things wrong with using AI for writing. I mean, it's a human endeavor. It's a human endeavor. Imagine if a friend of yours wrote you a letter, but they used AI for it. You'd be insulted. Yet for some reason, all of these writers and content producers seem to think it's okay to voice that on the reader. I believe in this really simple idea that you should treat the reader with the same respect you would treat your friend, your partner, your family. Treat the reader with the same respect you'd want to be treated with yourself. And for that reason alone, I find AI insulting. Not to mention the fact that I have this belief that if you think AI produces quality in a work, or work that's as good as what you've done, you have no idea what quality is. And it actually means your work before wasn't that good. And that's a big thing. And I think that's also where people's skills are dropped. It's when they use AI and they think, this is actually usable. This is good. If they think that's good, they need to reevaluate their idea of what's good. It's like people who go to McDonald's, I think that's a great meal. No shame in McDonald's. I grew up in McDonald's. But don't think that McDonald's is the equivalent of a 5-star restaurant. They service different needs.
Yeah.
So I guess that means you won't be mentioning any AI tools when I ask you about the tools that you would be lost without, which is something we like to ask all our guests.
You know, you could argue that the one AI tool that is allowable is transcription tools, because every journalist loathes transcribing. They loathe it. It takes so much time. But even then, for example, I'm old enough to have used the tape recorders for recording interviews. And it was by listening to a recording again and again and again and again, trying to get the words right, that I would start thinking about the interview differently. And I'd start thinking about what they were saying differently. Whereas if it's just transcribed, you pull out the key quotes, it makes the job faster, but it's actually not better. Having said that, to be honest, I think AI transcription tools are a good idea, provided you still listen to it again, at least once yourself. At least once. You don't have to be as obsessive as me and listen to it 20 times, but at least once rather than relying on the tool. So I think the transcription tools, and there's so many of them now, I think that's a valid use. keeping in mind, to be honest, I'm actually really glad I didn't have that when I was younger.
Yeah.
I'm really glad I did it the old way, even though it drove me freaking nuts and it took up so much time. But I actually think tools can get in the way of good writing. I mean, we forget that even word processing is relatively new. For most of the last century, people used typewriters. And to use a typewriter, you would actually have to work in the first draft in your head. Because you couldn't use a typewriter the way people use, word processors. And actually, if you work in your first draft in your head, and that's how I work, then your first draft is a lot better. Your second draft is better. Your third draft is better. And you can actually come up with something much faster and better than if you were to use frickin' AI. So I actually believe tools get in the way of good writing. I actually do all my writing either on the notes app on my phone or just on Microsoft Word. Or, even on pen and paper if for some reason I can't do that. I think tools are a distraction. I think really we're dealing with words and ideas and thought. It's about thought more than anything else.
I want to go back to something you just said about the transcription, because I think, I'm obsessed with Otter. That's what I use for transcription now. But I really agree with you that we have lost something in AI transcription, because I really believe that the practice of transcribing something helps you put the story together. And, when you're not doing that anymore, something, a tool is doing it for you. Yeah, I've always thought that, actually. Not to say that I don't use Otter because I want to save time like everybody else, but I do think something has been lost there. Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember, I think it might have been Peter Fitzsimons, and he wrote a column a few weeks back, which really pissed me off because it's a column I wanted to write, and he beat me freaking to it. But he wrote about how often it's just the act of writing that allows you to think about things, you change things, and you change things, and you change things. I'm being hypocritical because just a moment ago I said I write the first draft in my head, and I do. But there are also times when you write something, you think about it differently. And you're perfectly right. The same goes for transcription. You think about the interview differently. And you start, it's such a huge part of it. But having said that, look, I actually am all for Otter myself. I think that's definitely a huge place for those transcription tools. But I recommend a hybrid model. You use the tools, but you don't rely on them. You still listen to it. I actually reckon even a few times yourself as well.
Interesting.
And I recommend using those transcription tools just to do the typing for you. But then you listen to it, you correct it, and you listen to it again and again and again. But it simply saves you on the RSI element. But you should still listen to it multiple times. That's how I would recommend using the tool. But those transcription tools are the only valid use for AI in the world of writing. For medical research, absolutely use AI. Data mining, absolutely.
Yeah.
But not for human freaking communication. Like, are people nuts? What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good place to leave it, to finish, because I think I love the passion. I love the passion for writing. And I think sometimes we forget that in the churn of deadlines and copy and things like that. The journalism, as you said.
Great word.
Oh, thank you, Dan. So interesting.
Yeah.
I love your passion. I love your courses, and I love the love of sub-editing. That's something that's close to my heart. So, but that brings us to the end of the show. So tell us a little bit about where people can find you, check out your courses, and maybe even the odd angry column to the Herald.
Well, my website is mediasurvival.com. And so people can find out all about my courses there. They can't read my angry columns to the Herald there, but they can find out about my courses there. Which is probably more beneficial for them anyway. Mediasurvival.com.
And did you have a special offer you mentioned for our listeners?
So I might have been drunk when I gave you this offer, but I will hold up to it, which is I'll give your listeners 15% off any of my public courses, which, by the way, I don't offer discounts anywhere. So there's no other discount offered on anywhere else.
Wow, we feel special.
And he caught me when I was drunk on bourbon. So 15% off.
Oh,
any
that's so
type of
good.
business.
And
Thanks,
so we'll
Dan.
put that in the show notes, won't
Yeah.
we? The code that you need to do that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Dan. That's great. We really loved having you as our guest this week, and we'll be back next week with another guest. So we'll see you then.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. It was really fun talking to you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks again to our wonderful sponsors, Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software that helps freelancers run their business with confidence.
And don't forget, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, you can check your welcome emails for an exclusive discount code on the annual subscription rate. You can also find it in the private Facebook Gold group, or just contact us at hello@rachelslist.com.au.